The Union sergeant was on his knees in the Missouri dust. His hands were bound behind his back, his blue uniform was torn at the shoulder, and standing above him was the most feared man in the state, holding something small, something crumpled, something that looked like fabric. Bill Anderson's voice was barely above a whisper. How old was she? The sergeant blinked. Sweat ran down his face. He did not understand the question. There was no she here, just him, just Anderson, just 40 guerrillas with pistols and knives and eyes that had stopped being human somewhere along the Missouri-Kansas border. How old was she? Bill held up the fabric, unfolded it slowly. The sergeant saw it was a dress, a small dress, a child's dress. The fabric was stiff in places, stained with something that had turned brown-black with time. I do not know what you... 14. Bill's jaw tightened. She was 14 years old, and your Union friends crushed her under a building while she screamed for 6 minutes. And you want to tell me you do not know? The sergeant never answered. What happened next is recorded in 3 separate Union testimonies. None of them are appropriate for this story, but they all agree on one thing. The question Bill Anderson asked, how old was she? He asked it to every single prisoner for 18 months straight, and every single time he made them look at that dress first. But here is what the history books do not tell you. Here is the part that changes everything you think you know about Bloody Bill Anderson. That dress was not a trophy. It was not a symbol of hatred. It was a funeral shroud that he was never allowed to give his sister. And the question he asked was not really about age at all, but we will get to that. First, you need to understand how a peaceful farmer from Kansas became the most ruthless guerrilla of the Civil War. How a man who had never fired a gun in anger transformed into someone who kept 53 scalps on his saddle. How the death of one 14-year-old girl created Bloody Bill, because this is not just a story about violence. This is a story about what grief does to a human soul when justice is denied, and it started with a letter. The Anderson family came to Kansas in 1857. William Anderson was 17 years old. His father, Arthur, was a cattle trader. His mother, Martha, ran the household, and his sisters, Mary, Josephine, and Jenny, were the light of the family, especially Josephine. She was 11 when they arrived, dark hair, quick smile, a laugh that neighbors would later describe as sounding like church bells on a clear morning. Bill was protective of her from the start. In a frontier world of hard men and harder choices, Josephine represented everything worth protecting, everything worth building, everything worth fighting for. But here is what you need to understand about Kansas. In 1857, it was not a state yet. It was a war zone. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 had turned the territory into a battleground between pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces. Armed bands roamed the countryside, towns burned, men died in their fields, and the violence was not random. It was organized. On one side, the Jayhawkers, anti-slavery militias from Kansas who raided Missouri farms, freed slaves, and often killed anyone who resisted. On the other side, the Bushwhackers, pro-slavery guerrillas from Missouri who responded with equal brutality. And caught in the middle, families like the Andersons. Arthur Anderson tried to stay neutral. He traded cattle with both sides. He kept his head down. He told his children that this war would pass and that all they had to do was survive it. He was wrong, but we will get to that. First, you need to know what happened to Josephine, and that means understanding what Order Number 11 really was. Because most people think Bill Anderson became a killer because of politics, because of slavery, because of the great moral crisis of his age. They are wrong. Bill Anderson became a killer because the Union Army arrested his 14-year-old sister, locked her in a building, and then let that building collapse on her head, and they called it an accident. The date was August 13th, 1863, Kansas City, Missouri, a three-story brick building on Grand Avenue. Union forces had been using it as a makeshift prison for the wives, sisters, and daughters of known Confederate guerrillas. The building was not designed to be a prison. It was old. The foundation was cracked. The walls had been reported as unstable months earlier, and yet the Union Army packed it with women and children. Josephine Anderson was inside. So was Mary Anderson, her older sister. So was the sister of Cole Younger, another guerrilla who would later ride with Jesse James. So was the sister of John McCorkle, one of Quantrill's raiders. The Union's logic was simple. If you cannot catch the guerrillas, take their families, hold them hostage, use them as leverage. But here is what happened on August 13th. Witnesses reported hearing a loud crack sometime in the early afternoon, then screaming, then the sound of masonry collapsing. The building did not fall all at once. It crumbled, slowly, floor by floor. The women on the top floors had time to scream, time to call out names, time to pray. Josephine was on the second floor. She was pinned under a collapsed beam. Her legs were crushed. Her chest was compressed. She could not move. She could barely breathe, and for 6 minutes she screamed, not for help, for Bill. She screamed her brother's name over and over until her lungs filled with dust and her voice gave out and the weight of the building finished what the Union Army had started. She was 14 years old, but here is what the Union report said. Structural failure, unavoidable, tragic accident, no one at fault. And here is what the surviving women said. The guards had been removing support beams from the basement, weakening the structure deliberately, because someone, somewhere, had decided that these women were more useful dead than alive, that their deaths would break the guerrillas, that grief would make them surrender. They were wrong about that too, but we will get to what happened next. First, you need to understand how Bill found out. Bill Anderson was camped 30 miles south of Kansas City when the messenger arrived. He was 23 years old, tall, lean, dark eyes that his men would later describe as haunted even before Josephine died. He had been riding with Quantrill's raiders for nearly a year by then. He had killed men. He had seen friends die. He thought he understood war. He did not. The messenger was a farmer's son, maybe 16. He rode into camp at dusk and asked for William Anderson by name. When Bill stepped forward, the boy could not meet his eyes. "It is your sister, sir, Josephine." There was a building in Kansas City. It fell down. She was inside. "I'm sorry, sir. I am so sorry." Bill did not speak. His men would later testify that he stood perfectly still for almost a full minute. His face did not change. His hands did not move. He simply stopped. Then he asked one question. "Where is she buried?" The boy shook his head. "They have not. The Union still has the bodies. They say they are investigating. They say family cannot claim them yet." Bill's right hand moved to the pistol at his hip. The leather holster creaked in the silence, and the boy ran. He ran back to his horse, and he rode out of that camp as fast as he could, and he never looked back, because he had seen something in Bill Anderson's eyes that no human being should ever have to see. He had seen a soul die and something else take its place. Bill rode to Kansas City alone. His men wanted to come with him. Quantrill himself tried to stop him. It was suicide, they said. The city was crawling with Union troops. There was no way he would get within a mile of the building. Bill did not care. He rode through the night. He avoided the main roads. He came into Kansas City from the south just before dawn, and he found the collapsed building on Grand Avenue while the sun was still rising. It was cordoned off with rope. 2 Union guards stood at the entrance. They were young, maybe 19. They had carbines, but they were not paying attention. Bill walked past them. He walked past them like he belonged there, like he was just another citizen come to gawk at the tragedy, like he had every right to be standing in the rubble of a collapsed building at 6 in the morning, and then he started digging. The guards saw him after about 2 minutes. They shouted at him to stop. They raised their carbines. They asked him who he was and what he was doing. Bill did not answer. He kept digging. One guard ran to get an officer. The other kept his carbine trained on Bill's back and kept shouting at him to stop, to put his hands up, to identify himself. Bill kept digging. The rubble was thick, bricks and mortar and splintered wood and broken glass. His hands started bleeding after the first few minutes. He did not stop. He could not stop, because somewhere under all this destruction was Josephine, and he would not leave her there. He would not let her rot under Union rubble while they wrote their reports and called it an accident and went home to their own sisters. No, he would find her, and then he would make them answer for what they had done. Bill found her. She was 3 feet under the debris. Her body was broken in ways that no brother should ever have to see. Her face was still recognizable, but barely. The weight of the building had done terrible things, and clutched in her right hand was a small dress. It was the dress she had been wearing the day they arrested her. The Union soldiers had made her change into prison clothes, but Josephine had held on to the dress. Her dress, the last piece of her life before everything went wrong. She had been holding it when the building fell. She had been holding it when she died. And now, Bill was holding it. The Union officer arrived about 10 minutes later. He found Bill Anderson sitting in the rubble, cradling his dead sister's body, holding a small blood-stained dress, and not moving. The officer recognized him immediately. William Anderson, guerrilla, wanted for murder, robbery, and treason against the United States. He should have arrested him on the spot. He did not. Later, in his official report, the officer would claim that Bill had escaped before he could be apprehended, that reinforcements had not arrived in time, that the situation was too chaotic to make an arrest. But eyewitnesses told a different story. They said the officer took one look at Bill Anderson sitting there with his dead sister and could not bring himself to do it. They said something in Bill's eyes made the officer step back, made him lower his pistol, made him wave off his men. They said the officer was afraid, not of Bill's gun, of something else, of what Bill had become. Bill buried Josephine himself, not in the Union Cemetery, not in any official graveyard. He took her body outside the city, found a quiet spot under an oak tree, and dug her grave with his own hands while the sun set over Missouri. He wrapped her in her prison clothes. But the dress, the small blood-stained dress she had been holding when she died, he did not bury that. He folded it carefully. He placed it in his saddlebag, and he carried it with him for the next 18 months. Every raid, every battle, every execution. That dress went everywhere Bill Anderson went. His men would later describe it as a kind of talisman, a reminder, a weight that Bill carried because he could not put it down. But it was more than that. It was the last thing Josephine had touched. It was proof that she had existed, and it was a question that Bill Anderson would ask every Union prisoner he took for the rest of his short, violent life. How old was she? The first time Bill asked the question was 3 days after he buried Josephine. A Union patrol had been ambushed on the road to independence. 5 soldiers, 3 dead in the initial attack, 2 captured. Bill's men expected him to execute them quickly. That was the usual practice. The guerrilla war in Missouri was brutal. Prisoners were a liability. Bullets were expensive. Time was precious. But Bill did not execute them quickly. He made them kneel. He pulled out the dress, and he asked the question, how old was she? The first soldier had no idea what Bill was talking about. He stammered. He begged. He said he had a wife in Ohio. He said he had never hurt anyone. He said he was just following orders. Bill held up the dress. The soldier looked at it. The fabric was still dark with Josephine's blood. The lace at the collar was torn. You could see where small fingers had gripped it tight in the moment of death. 14 years old. Bill's voice was flat, dead, empty. She was 14 years old, and your army put her in a building and let it fall on her head, and you tell me you never hurt anyone. The soldier started crying. Bill did not care. What happened next? Well, 3 separate witnesses gave testimony. The details varied, but the ending was always the same. When Bill rode away from that patrol, there were no survivors. And the question he had asked, how old was she, had become something new, something that would haunt Union soldiers for the rest of the war, something that turned a grieving brother into a legend of terror. Word spread fast. Within a month, every Union soldier in Missouri had heard about Bill Anderson and the dress. They told stories around campfires. They wrote letters home. They warned each other, if you are captured by Anderson, he will make you look at a child's dress. He will ask you how old she was. And if you do not know the answer, which you will not, you will die. Some soldiers thought it was propaganda, a myth designed to terrify, a ghost story for grown men. They learned the truth soon enough, because Bill was not satisfied with 1 patrol, or 2, or 10. He wanted answers. He wanted every Union soldier in Missouri to know who Josephine was, to know her age, to know how she died, to understand that their army, their righteous, flag-waving, Lincoln-loving army, had murdered a 14-year-old girl, and he wanted them to admit it. That was the thing about the question. How old was she? It was not really about age. It was about acknowledgement. It was Bill Anderson asking, do you see what you did? Do you understand the cost? Do you recognize the human being your army destroyed? And the answer, every single time, was no. Because the soldiers did not know. Because they had not been there. Because to them, Josephine Anderson was just another name on a casualty list. Just another regrettable incident in a war full of regrettable incidents. And that, more than anything, is what drove Bill Anderson mad. Not the death itself, the forgetting, the casual institutional forgetting of a 14-year-old girl who had done nothing wrong except be born into the wrong family at the wrong time. But here is where the story takes a turn, because there was 1 prisoner, just 1, who knew the answer. His name was Sergeant Thomas Howell, Union Army, Missouri Volunteer Infantry, and on October 3, 1864, he made the mistake of getting captured by Bill Anderson's guerrillas. The usual ritual began. Howell was forced to his knees. His hands were bound. Bill pulled out the dress. The same dress he had carried for 14 months, and held it up. How old was she? And Howell, Sergeant Thomas Howell, looked at that dress and said something that no prisoner had ever said before. 14. Her name was Josephine. I was there. Bill stopped. His men stopped. Everything stopped. What did you say? Howell's voice was shaking, but he kept talking. I was stationed in Kansas City when the building fell. I was one of the guards. I heard her scream. I tried to dig her out. I could not save her. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I have dreamed about it every night since. I'm sorry. Bill Anderson stared at this man who had been there, this man who had heard Josephine scream, this man who was the first person in 14 months to say her name out loud. What happened next? Nobody expected. Not Howell, not Bill's men, not even Jesse James, who was standing 15 feet away and watching with the same horrified fascination as everyone else. Bill Anderson lowered the dress. He looked at Thomas Howell for a long, silent moment. And then he said, "Tell me everything." And Thomas Howell talked for 2 hours. He told Bill about the women in the building, about the conditions they were kept in, about the food they were not given, about the guards who laughed at their requests for medicine, about the warnings that the structure was unstable, about the orders to ignore those warnings. He told Bill about the moment the building started to fall, about the screaming, About the dust, about digging through rubble with his bare hands while officers stood by and watched. He told Bill about finding Josephine, about her broken body, about the dress she was clutching, about how he had to pry it from her fingers because she was still holding on even in death. And when Howell finished talking, Bill Anderson did something that shocked everyone. He untied the man's hands. He helped him to his feet. He handed him his pistol. "Take it. Ride out of here. Tell your commanding officer what you told me. Tell them she had a name. Tell them she was 14. Tell them what they did." Howell took the pistol. He did not shoot. He did not run. He just stood there, looking at Bill Anderson, seeing something in those dead eyes that no one else had ever seen. "You loved her. She was your sister, and you loved her, and they took her from you." Bill did not answer, but his hand moved to his saddlebag, to the dress. 14 months he had carried it. 14 months he had asked the question, and now, finally, someone had answered. Howell rode away that day. He survived the war. He went back to Ohio, and for the rest of his life, he told anyone who would listen about the day he met Bloody Bill Anderson. He did not tell them about the killing. He told them about the dress, about the question, about the answer, and about the moment when the most feared man in Missouri showed something that looked almost like mercy. But the story does not end there, because 3 weeks after Thomas Howell rode away, Bill Anderson was dead, and the dress, Josephine's dress, was still in his saddlebag. October 26, 1864. Bill Anderson and his guerrillas were riding near Albany, Missouri. They had been raiding for weeks. They were tired, they were careless. They did not see the Union ambush until it was too late. 150 soldiers, hidden in the trees, waiting. Bill had 30 men. He knew it was suicide. He charged anyway. The first bullet hit him in the left temple. The second hit his chest. The third and fourth came so fast that witnesses could not tell where they struck. Bill Anderson fell from his horse. He was 24 years old, the same age Josephine would have been. If she had lived 10 more years, Union soldiers swarmed his body. They cut off his trigger finger. They stripped him of his weapons. They took his boots, his belt, his pistol, and then they found the saddlebag. They found the dress. The commanding officer held it up, confused. "What is this? Why would Bill Anderson carry a child's dress?" One of the captured guerrillas spoke up. "It belonged to his sister. She was 14. Your army killed her." The officer looked at the dress, at the bloodstains, at the small size, at the torn lace where a dying girl had gripped it. And for a moment, just for a moment, something crossed his face that might have been shame. Then he threw the dress in the mud. Get rid of it. Burn his body. This war is over. But the war was not over. And the dress, despite what the officer said, was not destroyed. Someone picked it up. Someone kept it. Someone understood what it meant. And that is how Josephine Anderson's dress survived the Civil War. That is how it ended up in a historical archive. That is how we know this story, because someone, somewhere, answered Bill's question. 14. Her name was Josephine, and she deserved to be remembered. But wait, we have been talking about the question, about the dress, about the ritual that made Bloody Bill famous. But we have not talked about what happened before Bill became Bloody Bill, before the dress became a symbol, before a peaceful family from Kansas learned what war really meant. Because Bill Anderson was not born a killer, he was made into one, and that story is almost worse than the killing itself. 1857. William Anderson was 17 years old when his family arrived in Kansas Territory. His father Arthur had heard about cheap land on the frontier, good grazing for cattle, a chance to build something. They came from a small town in Missouri. They brought 3 wagons, 40 head of cattle, and 5 children. Bill was the oldest son. Then came his brother Jim, then the three sisters, Mary, Josephine, and Jenny. Josephine was 11. She was everyone's favorite. There was something about her, a brightness, a quickness, a way of seeing the world that made people smile. She was always asking questions, always exploring, always laughing at things that were not funny to anyone else. Bill called her Joe, she called him Willie, and for a few years. Despite the violence swirling around Kansas territory, the Andersons lived something close to a normal life. Arthur traded cattle, Martha kept house, the children went to school when there was one, worked the farm when there was not. They went to church on Sundays. They said grace before meals. They were ordinary. Bill learned to ride, he learned to shoot, but only for hunting. He learned to track cattle across open prairie. He grew tall and strong and quiet. Neighbors remembered him as serious but fair, a good worker, a loyal friend. There was no violence in him, not yet. But here is what you need to understand about Kansas in the late 1850s. The territory was bleeding. Pro-slavery forces from Missouri were crossing the border to vote illegally and intimidate settlers. Anti-slavery forces from the east were pouring in to counter them. Armed bands roamed freely. Towns were burned. Men were dragged from their homes and shot, and the Anderson family, despite Arthur's best efforts, could not stay neutral. The trouble started in 1859. A group of Jayhawkers, anti-slavery raiders from Kansas, came to the Anderson farm looking for information about Confederate sympathizers. Arthur told them he did not know anything. He was just a cattle trader. He did not take sides. The Jayhawkers did not believe him. They searched the house. They frightened the children. They threatened Martha. They told Arthur that if he was not with them, he was against them. Arthur still refused to take a side. 2 months later, the Jayhawkers came back. This time, they did not just search. They took 14 cattle. They burned a storage shed. They told Arthur this was a warning. Pick a side, or there will not be a farm left to stay neutral on. Arthur Anderson picked a side that night, not because he believed in slavery. The historical record suggests he did not much care about it one way or another. He picked a side because the Jayhawkers had threatened his family, because they had burned his property, because he was a proud man who would not be bullied. He became, by default, a Confederate sympathizer. And that decision, that single decision made on a cold Kansas night in 1859, would cost him everything: his farm, his freedom, his children, his life. The Civil War began in April 1861. By that summer, Arthur Anderson was dead. The details are murky. Some accounts say he was killed by Jayhawkers in a raid on the family farm. Others say he was arrested and shot while trying to escape. Still others suggest he was murdered in a dispute over cattle. What is certain is that by August 1861, the Anderson family had no father. Bill was 21. He was now responsible for his mother, his brother, and his 3 sisters. And the war was just beginning. Bill joined the Confederate forces almost immediately. Not the regular army, the guerrillas. William Quantrill was recruiting in Missouri. He was forming a band of irregular fighters, men who would strike Union forces from behind, cut supply lines, disrupt communications. Men who did not wear uniforms and did not follow the rules of conventional warfare. Men who were willing to do whatever it took to win. Bill Anderson signed up. His reasons were simple. The Union had killed his father. The Jayhawkers had burned his property. His family was in danger, and if he joined the guerrillas, if he made himself useful to Quantrill, maybe his mother and sisters would be protected. He was wrong about that, but he did not know it yet. For 2 years, Bill Anderson fought. He raided Union supply lines. He ambushed patrols. He burned bridges and tore up railroad tracks and did all the things that guerrillas do. He killed men. He watched friends die. He learned what war really was. But through it all, he stayed human. His men would later describe him as strict but fair, violent when necessary but not cruel, a good leader, a steady hand. He was not Bloody Bill yet. That name would come later, after Josephine, after the building, after the dress. The Union knew about Bill Anderson by early 1863. He was on their list of wanted guerrillas. He was considered dangerous, and more importantly, he was considered vulnerable because Bill had something to protect. His family, his mother Martha was still alive, his sisters, Mary, Josephine, and Jenny, were still in Missouri. They had moved from Kansas after Arthur's death, trying to stay ahead of the violence. They were living with relatives. They were keeping their heads down. They thought they were safe. They were not. In July 1863, the Union Army issued Order Number 10. This order authorized the arrest and detention of any family members of known Confederate guerrillas. The logic was simple. If you could not catch the guerrillas, you could take their families, use them as hostages, force the guerrillas to surrender. Mary, Josephine, and Jenny Anderson were arrested on July 25, 1863. They were taken to Kansas City. They were placed in a 3-story brick building on Grand Avenue, along with a dozen other women and girls. The building was old. It was not designed to be a prison. It was falling apart, and no one cared. Josephine Anderson was 14 years old when they put her in that building. She had never committed a crime. She had never fired a gun. She had never done anything except be Bill Anderson's sister, and for that, she was arrested, imprisoned, treated like an enemy combatant. The conditions in the building were terrible. The women were given minimal food. They slept on bare floors. They had no medical care. They were not allowed visitors. They were not told when they would be released. Josephine wrote a letter to Bill, but it never reached him. In it, she described what was happening. They are treating us like animals. They are beating Mama. They will not tell us why we are here. I do not understand what we did wrong. Please come get us. Please. I am scared. Bill received that letter 2 days after Josephine died, 2 days after the building collapsed, 2 days after everything changed. August 13, 1863, 3 in the afternoon. The women in the building heard a crack, then another crack. Then the floor moved. Mary Anderson would later testify about what happened next. She was on the 3rd floor. She felt the building shift. She saw dust falling from the ceiling. She screamed for everyone to get out, but there was no time. The 3rd floor collapsed onto the 2nd. The 2nd floor collapsed onto the 1st. And the 1st floor, what was left of it, collapsed into the basement. Mary Anderson was thrown clear. She survived with broken bones. Josephine did not. She was trapped under a beam on the 2nd floor. Her legs were crushed. Her chest was compressed. She could not move, and for 6 minutes, she screamed, not for help, for Bill. She screamed his name over and over. She screamed it until her voice gave out. She screamed it until the dust filled her lungs, and the weight of the building pressed the life out of her. She died, calling for the one person who could not save her. She was 14 years old. 4 women died in that collapse. Josephine Anderson was the youngest. The Union issued a report calling it a structural failure, an accident, a tragedy, no one at fault. But survivors told a different story. They said the guards had been removing support beams from the basement. They said the building had been deliberately weakened. They said someone, somewhere, had decided that these women were expendable, that their deaths would break the guerrillas. The truth has never been definitively established. But here is what we know. The building was known to be unstable. The Union kept women there anyway, and when it collapsed, no one was punished. No one was held accountable. No one even said they were sorry. Bill Anderson received the news 2 days later. He was camped 30 miles south of Kansas City. A messenger rode in at dusk. A boy, maybe 16. Your sister is dead. The building fell. I am sorry. Bill did not react. His men watched him carefully, waiting for something, rage, tears, anything, but Bill just stood there, silent, still, his eyes fixed on something far away that only he could see. Then he moved. He walked to his horse. He mounted. He rode toward Kansas City without saying a word. His men tried to follow. Bill told them to stay. "This is something I have to do alone." And he rode into the night. What happened next? We have already covered. Bill found the building. Bill dug through the rubble. Bill found Josephine's body. Bill took her dress. Bill buried her under an oak tree outside Kansas City. And Bill, the Bill Anderson who had been a strict but fair guerrilla leader, the Bill Anderson who killed when necessary but was never cruel, the Bill Anderson who still had humanity in his eyes, that Bill Anderson died. The man who rode away from that grave was someone else, something else. Something that would terrify Missouri for the next 14 months. The first change was in his eyes. His men noticed it immediately, before Josephine's death. Bill's eyes had been dark but warm, intense but human. You could see him thinking, you could see him feeling after the burial. His eyes were empty, not angry, not sad, empty. One guerrilla later described it as looking into two gun barrels, cold metal, no soul behind them. The second change was in his behavior. Before, Bill had been careful, strategic. He planned raids. He avoided unnecessary risks. He treated prisoners according to the rough rules of guerrilla warfare, which meant killing them, but killing them quickly. After, Bill did not care about strategy. He did not care about risks. He did not care about quick deaths. He cared about one thing, making them see, making them understand, making them answer. For Josephine, the ritual with the dress began 3 days after the burial. It was not planned. Bill was interrogating a captured Union soldier, a young man, maybe 20, crying, begging for his life, swearing he had never done anything wrong, and something in Bill snapped. He reached into his saddlebag. He pulled out the dress. He held it in front of the soldier's face. "Do you see this?" The soldier looked at it, confused, terrified. "Do you know what this is?" The soldier shook his head. "It is a dress, a little girl's dress, my sister's dress. She was wearing it when your army arrested her. She was holding it when your army's building crushed her. She was 14 years old, 14 years old." Bill's voice cracked on the last words. Then it went flat again. "How old was she?" The soldier stammered, I do not." "How old was she?" 14, you said 14. Say her name. I do not know her name. Say her name. I do not know it. I swear I do not know it. Josephine. Her name was Josephine, and she screamed for 6 minutes while your army watched. Bill put down the dress. He drew his pistol. The soldier died without ever understanding what had happened. But Bill had found something, a ritual, a question, a way to make every Union soldier he killed understand, even for just a moment, who Josephine was. The ritual evolved over the following months. It became formalized, predictable, almost ceremonial. First, the prisoner was forced to kneel. Then, Bill pulled out the dress. Then, he asked the question. How old was she? The prisoner never knew the answer. Bill would tell them. 14. Her name was Josephine, and your army killed her. Then, Bill would ask one more question. Do you have any sisters? If the answer was yes, Bill would pause. Then how do you not understand? If the answer was no, Bill would just nod. Then you never will. And then, the execution. Word spread through the Union Army like wildfire. By the end of September 1863, every soldier in Missouri knew about Bill Anderson and the dress. They knew about the question. They knew what it meant to be captured by his guerrillas. It meant hearing about a dead girl. It meant looking at a blood-stained dress. It meant trying to answer a question that had no right answer. And then it meant dying. The Union issued orders to avoid Anderson at all costs. Patrols were doubled, scouts were sent ahead. Officers were told to retreat rather than risk capture, because capture by Bill Anderson was not just death, it was something worse. It was being made to understand what you had done, even if you personally had done nothing. Even if you had never heard of Josephine Anderson, even if you were just a 19-year-old farm boy from Ohio who had joined up because your father told you to. None of that mattered to Bill. All that mattered was the question. All that mattered was the dress. All that mattered was making someone, anyone, acknowledge that Josephine had existed, that she had mattered, that she had been 14 years old. But here is the part of the story that no one expected. Here is the part that complicates everything. Because Bill Anderson was not just a monster, he was also, in his own broken way, a man trying to grieve. And the dress, the question, the ritual. It was not really about vengeance. It was about memory. It was about making sure that Josephine was not forgotten, that her name was spoken, that her age was known, that somewhere, in the terror-filled mind of every Union soldier he captured, there would be a memory of a 14-year-old girl who died in a collapsing building. Bill Anderson was not just killing, he was mourning in the only way he knew how. Jesse James was 16 years old when he first witnessed the ritual. He had joined Anderson's guerrillas a few months earlier. A young man, angry, eager to prove himself. He had already killed Union soldiers. He thought he understood what war was. He did not. The day he witnessed Bill with the dress, everything changed. The guerrillas had captured 3 Union scouts near Independence. Standard practice would have been quick execution, but Bill took his time. He made the first scout kneel. He pulled out the dress. How old was she? The scout looked at the dress, at Bill, at the other guerrillas standing in a circle. Please, please, I have a family, I have a daughter. How old was she? I do not know. I do not know who you are talking about. Bill held the dress closer. Look at it. Look at the blood. Look at the size. This was a child's dress. A little girl wore this. My little sister wore this. And she died holding it while your army's building crushed her. The scout was crying now. I did not know. I was not there. I swear I did not know. 14. She was 14 years old. And no one in your army said sorry. No one was punished. No one even remembered her name. Bill's voice dropped to a whisper. Do you have any children? Yes. A daughter. She is 12. Bill nodded slowly. Then you understand what it means to lose one. The execution happened seconds later. Jesse James watched the whole thing, and something, some last piece of innocence, died in him that day. Years later, when Jesse James was the most famous outlaw in America, he would tell people about Bill Anderson and the dress. He would say that he learned something that day, not about killing, about grief, about what happens when grief has nowhere to go, about what happens when a soul is broken beyond repair. He called it the saddest thing he ever saw. Not the killing, the dress, the question, the look in Bill's eyes when he asked it. Jesse said Bill was not there anymore. Bill was back in Kansas City, back at that building, back in the rubble, digging with his bare hands, looking for a sister who was already dead. He never left that moment for 14 months. Bill Anderson lived in the moment he found Josephine's body and the dress. The question. They were just his way of taking everyone else there with him. Bush Smith met Bill Anderson in the spring of 1864. She was a local woman, widow of a Confederate soldier. She had heard about Bloody Bill. Everyone had. But she saw something in him that others did not. She saw the grief. They were married in May 1864. It was not a conventional marriage. Bill was a wanted outlaw. They could not live together. They could not build a home. They could not have the life that normal couples had. But they had something, and Bush tried. She tried so hard to help Bill put down the weight he was carrying. One night, he asked about the dress. "What is it? Why do you carry it?" Bill did not answer for a long time. Then he said, "It is the last thing she touched. The last piece of her. I cannot put it down." Bush reached for it. "Maybe it is time. Maybe you need to let go. Maybe." Bill's hand snapped out and grabbed her wrist. Not hard, not violent, but firm. "Do not." Bush looked at him. "Bill, you are carrying your own grave. This dress is killing you." Bill shook his head. "This dress is the only thing keeping me alive. The day I stop carrying it is the day I stop remembering why any of this matters." Bush never tried to take the dress again. She understood. The dress was not a trophy. It was not a weapon. It was a wound that Bill would not let heal, because if it healed, that meant accepting what had happened. And Bill Anderson would never accept what had happened, not until the day he died. October 26, 1864. The ambush at Albany, Missouri. 150 Union soldiers hidden in the trees, 30 guerrillas riding straight toward them. Bill saw the trap. Everyone saw the trap. One of his men, a young guerrilla named Archie, called out, "Bill, there are too many. We have to turn back." Bill looked at the trees, at the glint of sunlight on rifle barrels, at the Union soldiers waiting to kill him, and he smiled. For the first time in 14 months, he smiled. "No, Bill, what are you doing? Follow me or do not, but I am going forward." "Bill, that is suicide. I know." He drew his pistols. He kicked his horse into a gallop. He charged straight at 150 Union soldiers, and his men, every single one of them, followed. The first bullet hit Bill in the left temple. It should have killed him instantly. It did not. He kept riding. The second bullet hit his chest. The third hit his shoulder. The fourth. The fifth. They came so fast that no one could count. Bill Anderson fell from his horse about 50 yards from the Union line. He was dead before he hit the ground. He was 24 years old, the same age Josephine would have been. In 10 years, the Union soldiers swarmed his body. They stripped him of his weapons. They took his boots. They cut off his trigger finger as proof that Bloody Bill was finally dead. And then they found the saddlebag. The officer who opened it, a Captain James Young, pulled out a small bundle of fabric. "What the hell is this?" One of the captured guerrillas spoke up. "That belonged to his sister. She was 14. Your army killed her." Captain Young looked at the dress, at the bloodstains, at the size. So small, a child's dress. He stood there for a long moment. Then he threw it in the mud. "Get rid of it, burn his body. This war is over." But someone picked up the dress. We do not know who. A guerrilla who escaped, a sympathetic local, maybe even a Union soldier who felt something when he looked at that small blood-stained fabric. Someone picked it up. Someone kept it. Someone made sure that Josephine Anderson's dress survived the Civil War, that it ended up in an archive, that historians could find it, that we could tell this story. You have just heard one of the darkest chapters of American history, a story about a man who became a monster who was created by grief, a grief that was caused by an institution that did not care about a 14-year-old girl. Stories like this, the ones they do not teach in school, take time to research and tell properly. When you click Super Thanks, you are not just supporting a channel, you are saying, "This history matters." Every contribution helps us uncover more forgotten stories like Josephine's. What was Bill Anderson really asking when he held up that dress? When he looked into the eyes of Union soldiers? When he said those words? How old was she? Was he asking about age? Was he asking them to remember? Was he asking them to feel guilty? Or was he asking something deeper, something that every grieving person asks. Do you see her? Do you see that she existed? Do you see that she mattered? Do you see that a life was lost? A real life, a 14-year-old life, a life with laughter and questions and dreams, and no one even said sorry. Bill Anderson was not asking about age. He was asking about acknowledgement. He was asking every Union soldier to look at that dress and understand that the war they were fighting had a cost, a human cost, a cost measured in blood-stained fabric and screaming children and brothers who would never be the same. And the answer, every single time, was silence. Because the soldiers did not know. Because they could not know. Because war does not teach you to see the people on the other side. Bloody Bill Anderson died on October 26, 1864. The Union displayed his body for 3 days. People came to spit on it. Women came to stab it. Children threw rocks. This was the monster. This was Bloody Bill. This was the man who had terrorized Missouri for over a year. This was the end. But it was not the end. Because Jesse James survived, because the guerrillas scattered but did not disappear, because the anger that created Bill Anderson did not die with him. It just found new forms, new outlets, new ways to express itself. The James Younger Gang, the outlaw era, the Wild West itself, all of it, in some way, traces back to a collapsing building in Kansas City, to a 14-year-old girl, to a dress that Bill Anderson could not put down. History is not a series of events. It is a series of reactions. And everything that happened after August 13th, 1863, was a reaction to Josephine Anderson's death, to the question her brother kept asking, to the answer no one could give. How old was she? 14. Her name was Josephine. She screamed for 6 minutes, and her brother spent the rest of his life trying to make sure she was not forgotten. He failed. Most people have never heard of Josephine Anderson. Most history books do not mention her name. Most accounts of Bloody Bill focus on the killing, on the scalps, on the terror he caused. But now you know. Now you know about the dress. Now you know about the question. Now you know about a man who was not born a monster, but was made into one by an institution that did not care about a little girl. And maybe, just maybe, that changes how you see this story, not as a tale of good versus evil, but as a tale of grief, of loss, of what happens when justice is denied, of what any of us might become if we lost someone we loved and no one even said sorry. Was Bill Anderson a monster? Or was he a product of monstrous times? There is no easy answer. History is not black and white. Neither are the people who lived it. What do you think? Comment below, and remember, every story has 2 sides, sometimes more. But there is one more thing you need to know. One more part of this story that changes everything. We talked about Thomas Howell, the Union sergeant who knew the answer, the one who was there when the building collapsed, the one Bill let go, but we did not tell you what happened to him after the war. Thomas Howell went back to Ohio in 1865. He married, he had 3 children, he became a school teacher in a small town outside Cleveland, and every year, on August 13th, he would go silent. His wife noticed it first. "Thomas, what is wrong? Why do you stop talking every August?" Howell never told her, not at first, but in 1889, 26 years after the building collapsed, he finally broke his silence. He wrote a letter to a Missouri newspaper. In it, he described what happened in Kansas City on August 13th, 1863. He described the women in the building. He described the collapse. He described digging through rubble with his bare hands. He described finding a 14-year-old girl named Josephine Anderson. He described the dress she was holding, and he described meeting Bill Anderson. The letter caused a sensation. People had forgotten about Bloody Bill by then. The Wild West era was ending. Jesse James had been dead for 7 years. The guerrilla war was ancient history, but Howell's letter brought it all back. He wrote, "I have spent 26 years trying to forget what I saw in that building. I have spent 26 years trying to forget the face of that dying girl. I have spent 26 years trying to forget the question her brother asked me. How old was she? I knew the answer. I told him. 14. Her name was Josephine, and he let me go. I have thought about that moment every day since. Why did he let me go? Why did he spare me when he killed so many others? I think it was because I answered. I think it was because I saw her, because I knew her name, because I acknowledged what had happened. Bill Anderson was a killer. History remembers him as a monster, and maybe he was. But he was also a brother who lost his sister in the most terrible way imaginable. A brother who carried her dress for 14 months. A brother who asked every prisoner the same question because he needed someone, anyone, to understand. I understood, and for that, he let me live. I do not know if I deserved that mercy. I was there when the building fell. I could not save her. I carry that guilt with me still, but I can do one thing. I can remember her name. Josephine Anderson, 14 years old, died August 13th, 1863. May she rest in peace. May her brother, finally, rest too. Thomas Howell died in 1903. He was 71 years old. In his final years, he became something of a minor celebrity. People sought him out. They wanted to hear the story of Bloody Bill and the dress. Howell always told them the same thing. Do not call him Bloody Bill. Call him William Anderson. And understand, he was not born that way. He was made that way. By a war that did not care about little girls. The last words Howell ever spoke, according to his daughter who was at his bedside, were these. 14. Her name was Josephine. He died answering the question one last time. The dress itself, Josephine's dress, passed through many hands after Bill's death. For decades, no one knew where it was. Then, in 1923, a woman in Missouri came forward. She claimed her grandmother had picked up the dress after Bill's execution. She had kept it hidden. She had never told anyone. The woman donated the dress to a historical society. They put it in a display case. They wrote a small card to go with it. The card read, "Dress belonging to Josephine Anderson, age 14, died August 13th, 1863 in the Kansas City building collapse. Carried by her brother William Bloody Bill Anderson until his death in October 1864. The dress is still there, in a museum in Missouri. Small, faded. The bloodstain's almost invisible now, but if you look closely, you can still see where small fingers grip the fabric. You can still see the torn lace at the collar. You can still see, if you know what to look for, the weight of 14 months of grief. The weight of a question no one could answer. The weight of a brother who could not put it down. People sometimes ask, what was Bill Anderson really like? Was he insane? Was he evil? Was he just a product of his time? The answer, like most answers in history, is complicated. Bill Anderson did terrible things. There is no denying that. The scalps, the executions, the terror he caused. But he was also a man who loved his sister more than anything in the world. A man who watched that sister die and could not save her. A man who carried her dress because it was the only way he knew to keep her memory alive. He was a monster. He was also a brother. Both things are true. And that is what makes this story so hard to tell. Because we want our villains to be simple. We want them to be evil from birth. We want them to be clearly separate from us. But Bill Anderson was not born a villain. He was made into one. By a collapsing building, by a screaming 14-year-old, by a question that no one would answer. The Civil War killed over 600 Americans. Most of them are forgotten. But Josephine Anderson, a 14-year-old girl who never fired a gun, never took a side, never did anything except be born into the wrong family. She is remembered because her brother would not let the world forget her, because he asked the question so many times that it became legend, because even now, over 160 years later, we are still talking about a small, blood-stained dress. How old was she? 14. Her name was Josephine, and she mattered. She still matters. That is what Bill Anderson was really asking. Does she matter? Do you see her? Do you see that she was a person? Do you see that she had a life? Do you see that she was 14 years old? And the answer we owe him, the answer we owe her is yes. Yes, we see her. Yes, she mattered. Yes, we remember. That is the story of Bill Anderson and the dress. Not a story of good and evil, not a story of heroes and villains. A story of grief, a story of loss, a story of what happens when a soul breaks and cannot be repaired, and a story of a question that still echoes through history. How old was she? 14. Her name was Josephine. And now, you will never forget her either.